Working your first day at a new job can be a mix of excitement and nerves. You might expect new coworkers, unfamiliar tasks, and a lot of questions. But what if your first day took a turn for the terrifying? Today, we're diving into 3 very disturbing true first day on the job horror stories, experiences so chilling, they'll make you think twice before accepting your next job offer. If you love true horror stories, creepy encounters, and terrifying tales, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Let's begin with these true scary horror stories, if you dare. This story is about the shadow in the warehouse. Liam had just landed his first job at an old, sprawling warehouse in the middle of nowhere. The place had been around for decades, and while the pay was decent, there was an unsettling aura about it. His first day started off like any other: early morning, a handshake from his supervisor, and a tour of the facility. But as the hours passed, the warehouse felt colder, darker. The employees mostly kept to themselves, which Liam thought was odd but shrugged off. After all, it was his first day, and he didn't want to make waves. Later in the afternoon, Liam was asked to do inventory in the farthest corner of the warehouse, a section he hadn't seen before. As he walked deeper into the dimly lit space, an unsettling silence enveloped him. His footsteps echoed against the concrete walls, and the flickering overhead lights only added to the tension in the air. It felt like the air itself was alive, thick with whispers that he couldn't quite hear. A strange sensation crept up his spine, a sensation as if someone, or something, was watching him. As Liam began counting boxes, he heard a faint noise, like the sound of someone dragging their feet across the floor. He turned, expecting to see a coworker, but the aisle was empty. Shaking his head, he brushed it off as nerves. But then, the noise came again, closer this time. He spun around, his heart racing. The sound stopped. Liam stepped back, his breath quickening, but as he did, he noticed something in the corner of his eye, a shadow. It was dark and unnatural, standing still at the end of the aisle, watching him. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe. It was just there, dark and silent. His pulse raced as he backed away slowly. Then, the shadow took a step forward. It was as if the room itself grew colder, the whispers louder. Terrified, Liam ran out of the aisle, feeling an invisible grip on his body, pulling him back. He finally burst through the warehouse doors, gasping for air, but when he turned back to look, the shadow had vanished. That night, Liam lay awake in bed, disturbed by the events of the day. But the nightmares were worse. He dreamed of the dark shadow, looming over him, whispering his name in a voice he couldn't understand. The whispering grew louder and louder until it turned into a deafening roar. He woke up, sweating, the words still echoing in his mind. The next morning, Liam returned to work, but when he stepped into the warehouse, it felt different. He could still feel the shadow's presence, just beyond his reach. He never returned after that day. To this day, Liam believes the warehouse was haunted, but it wasn't just the physical space that was cursed. It was the chilling tales of those who worked there, whispering about dark secrets they dared not speak of. Liam heard from other employees later that the warehouse had a grim history: strange disappearances, eerie noises, and ghostly apparitions. Some whispered of a haunting so deep, even the most experienced workers were too afraid to speak of it. Others spoke of the terrible, paranormal grip the place had on anyone who dared to linger in its darkest corners. Those who had worked late or ventured into the warehouse's forgotten sections would often return with stories of feeling a cold, ghostly hand grasping their shoulder, or hearing chilling whispers as they stood alone in the shadows. There were whispers of an old security guard who had been found frozen in fear, his eyes wide with terror, claiming that something had been watching him for years, something unseen, something with dark secrets tied to the very foundation of the warehouse. Some even said it was a curse, passed down through generations, tied to a terrible accident that had occurred decades ago, forever tying the building to the realm of the paranormal. The whispers, the cold presence, the ghostly encounters, they were all linked to something far older and far more terrifying than anyone could comprehend. As Liam lay in bed that night, the echo of the ghostly whispers haunted him. The strange sensations, the shadow, the gripping presence, it all felt like a warning. There were spirits trapped in the warehouse, and they were waiting for their next victim. Liam knew he had narrowly escaped with his life, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the warehouse was calling him back, its ghostly whispers persistent, its haunting grip relentless. He never returned after that night. The darkness within that warehouse had claimed more than just his first job, it had claimed his sanity. The story of Liam's first day on the job quickly turned into one of the most terrifying tales shared amongst the workers at the local bar. People would tell their true horror stories of the haunted warehouse and its chilling tales, some warning others to never venture too far into the shadowy corners of the building. To this day, no one knows what really haunts that warehouse, whether it's the ghostly spirits of those lost to time or something far darker, lurking just out of reach, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul. This story is about the dead-end job. Sarah had always been excited about her new job as a night receptionist at an old office building downtown. It was a quiet place, the perfect spot to read or catch up on some sleep, she thought. Her first day started off well. The office was eerily empty, just her, the night security guard, and the building's dim lighting. The only thing that seemed strange was the old elevator that had a mind of its own, occasionally making strange noises and stopping between floors. As the night wore on, Sarah was left alone in the lobby, the quiet broken only by the occasional sound of the elevator. But after midnight, things started to change. She heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the direction of the elevator. She glanced up, expecting to see the security guard, but the footsteps were too soft, too slow. They didn't sound like they came from anyone alive. She stood up and walked toward the elevator, but when she reached it, the doors opened to an empty shaft. There was no sign of anyone. The elevator light flickered, and Sarah could feel a chill in the air. Her skin tingled as if the atmosphere itself was charged with something paranormal. Just as she turned to leave, the elevator doors slammed shut with a deafening bang. Sarah's heart raced as she rushed back to the desk. That's when she heard it, a whisper, soft at first, then louder. It was a voice, familiar yet foreign. "You shouldn't be here," it said. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. The voice seemed to be coming from the elevator. Terrified, she glanced over at the security camera feed, hoping to find some sign of life. But the footage was static, blank, black, as though the cameras were malfunctioning. Sarah tried to shake the dread building up in her chest and went back to her seat. But the whispers continued, becoming more insistent, more urgent. "Leave, now." The air grew heavy, oppressive, as though the building itself was alive and trying to suffocate her. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she rushed to grab her things, but as she approached the door, the lights went out. The room was plunged into darkness. The whispering grew louder, and the sensation of a cold hand brushed across her neck. Sarah ran, heart pounding, but the door wouldn't budge. She pounded on it, screaming for help. But no one came. When she finally managed to break free, she looked back one last time, just in time to see the elevator doors open, and something dark, shapeless, and horrifying stepped into the hallway. Sarah never returned to that building. She learned from a former employee that the building had a dark history, numerous people had vanished there under mysterious circumstances. Some said it was the ghost of the building's original owner, whose body was never found. Others said it was something darker, something that thrived on fear. All Sarah knew was that her first day on the job had been her last. The building's twisted past was filled with chilling stories whispered by those who dared to stay late. Some claimed that at night, the elevator was haunted, its erratic movements driven by the vengeful spirit of the building's original owner. The air was thick with paranormal activity, and even the bravest security guards would experience sleep paralysis as they patrolled the hallways, their senses heightened by an unseen presence. Many reported hearing ghostly whispers, as if the building itself was calling to them from the depths of the elevator shaft, urging them to leave before it was too late. As word spread, the building's haunted reputation grew, with people exchanging terrifying tales of encounters with dark, ghostly hands that would reach out and grip them when they least expected it. Others spoke of chilling narratives of those who had worked there, only to be consumed by the oppressive force that seemed to hang over the place like a dark cloud. Every new tenant was warned to avoid the elevator after midnight, but Sarah had already learned the hard way. The whispers that once haunted the lobby were now etched in her memory forever, their chilling voices lingering long after she left. Despite the building's empty facade, Sarah couldn't escape the unsettling feeling that something was always watching her. She often heard the haunting whispers in her dreams, calling her back to the building. But she knew she would never return. The building, its ghostly presence, and the terrifying grip of fear it had on anyone who worked there were enough to drive her away. The last thing Sarah wanted was to be the next ghostly figure whispered about in the chilling stories of the haunted building, vanishing into the night without a trace. This story is about The Forgotten Room. Tom had just started his dream job as an IT technician for an old law firm. The building was historic, a grand structure that stood as a testament to the city's past. His first day was full of excitement, setting up computers and getting to know his colleagues. The office was busy, but it wasn't until late in the evening, when most of the staff had left, that Tom's real experience began. As he walked down the darkened hallways, he noticed something strange, an old, locked door at the end of a hallway. Tom had seen the door before but had never paid it much attention. It was just part of the old building's charm. But something about it tonight seemed different. A sense of unease settled in his stomach, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Curiosity got the better of him, and Tom walked down the hallway. The closer he got to the door, the more the temperature seemed to drop. The air felt thick, charged with an energy that made his skin crawl. As he reached for the doorknob, he felt it, something cold, icy, gripped his hand. It wasn't the door. It was something behind it. The whispering began, low at first, like the sound of distant voices. Then the voices grew louder, like a chorus of souls trapped between worlds. They seemed to chant in unison, calling Tom's name. He yanked his hand away, heart racing, and backed up quickly. But as he turned to leave, the door creaked open on its own. He froze in place. What lay behind that door was not an office, not a storage room. It was a dark, empty space, void of light. But as Tom stared into the abyss, something moved within. A shadow, quick and fluid, darted across the room. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, and the whispers stopped. Tom ran, not daring to look back. But the sensation of being followed stayed with him the entire night. He couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had been behind that door was now inside the building, and it was watching him. The next morning, Tom mentioned the strange door to his co-workers, but none of them had ever seen it before. When he asked about it, the response was always the same: "There's nothing there. You're imagining things." But Tom knew what he had seen, and heard. His first day on the job had turned into a nightmare. And as he walked out of the building, he could have sworn he heard the whispers again. This time, they were calling his name. In the weeks that followed, Tom couldn't escape the feeling that something was lurking in the building. Every time he walked down the hallway, the temperature would drop, and his skin would prickle with a sense of dread. He began to experience sleep paralysis at night, his body trapped, unable to move as the same ghostly whispers echoed in his mind. His co-workers dismissed his concerns, but Tom couldn't shake the idea that the haunted room wasn't just a figment of his imagination, it was real, and something dark had been awakened. Late one night, he decided to go back to the door. But when he reached it, he felt a cold, ghostly grip around his wrist. Something was holding him back. A pale, ghostly hand appeared beneath the door, reaching for him. Tom ran, but the whispers followed, their chilling, haunting tones growing louder, now desperate, almost angry. Tom knew he had awakened something that would never let him go. These true scary horror stories prove that some jobs are far from ordinary. From haunted warehouses to cursed offices, the supernatural is waiting just around the corner. If these terrifying tales gave you chills, be sure to like, subscribe, and share for more spine-tingling stories. And the next time you get a job offer, you might want to check the building's history before stepping inside. Stay safe, and remember, not all jobs are what they seem.